Welcome to the Chapter 12 video lecture, Crimes Against Public Order and Morals. So really quick, we'll pull up the syllabus. We're going to note that for this week, you're assigned page 487 to 499 in Chapter 12 and 506 to 504. So we're not going to cover every single part of this chapter, just as a short reminder. The parts we are going to cover, one section involves disorderly conduct. Under the common law, this was considered any behavior that breached the peace. So kind of think maybe caused problems or chaos. Disorderly conduct charges are considered to be a really important part of criminal justice because they affect a large number of defendants. They span a wide number of activity and behaviors in public, and because of that, they can really shape people's views of the criminal justice system, have a lasting effect on this. So as disorderly conduct has evolved, we have actual disorderly conduct, which is breach of the public peace, which includes fighting and making unreasonable noise. Constructive disorderly conduct is where you try to provoke or excite somebody else to break the peace, so to have that unreasonable noise or to get into a fight. The problem with disorderly conduct statutes is that they're vague. So the Model Penal Code rewrote it, and they actually classified it into multiple groups. So disorderly conduct is fighting in public, unreasonable noise, or engaging in abusive language in a public place, and creating a hazardous or offensive condition. So this would be like throwing trash on your neighbor's yard or something like that. Setting up a stink bomb in a movie theater. Those are types of things that would qualify for that. Additionally, under the Model Penal Code, there's also a false public alarm statute, public drunkenness, a loitering statute, and obstructing a highway or public passage, or disrupting a meeting or procession, that are also different types of disorderly conducts, but that just have their own specific criteria, so that the basics criteria doesn't become too broad to violate the void for vagueness requirement that we talked about way back at the beginning of the semester in Chapter 2. The most common type of disorderly conduct charge is the ban on fighting in public. While I was in practice, I had a ton of disorderly conducts, and they almost all were fighting. And the empirical research also supports that the most common use of these statutes is the ban on public fighting. So disorderly conduct crimes, really important partners because they affect so many people across society. The punishment, though, we'll go ahead and note, oftentimes is not too severe. Depending on what you did, can grade it up to higher tiers of misdemeanors, but some of these are just minor misdemeanors where you just are going to have a fairly small fine, and that's the consequence. Quality of life crimes are kind of bad manners crimes. And two important of these are vagrancy and loitering. These have been crimes for about 600 years. Vagrancy is the crime of a poor person. Definition is a poor person wandering with no visible means of support. This has been fairly problematic because what does it mean to appear to have no public means of support? That can be very vague. So we have seen states continually reformulate the terminology. Loitering is the crime of remaining in a place with no apparent purpose. So we again have seen the Supreme Court strike some of these statutes down because they are too vague. And so one important thing to know here is these are also related to crime of panhandling. Sometimes they even go hand in hand, which is begging for money or food. And all of these statutes, if they involve speech, the government cannot tell people they cannot panhandle, and they also need to make sure the statute is specific enough that you can know what's prevented and not violate the law. For panhandling, they cannot tell you that you cannot beg for food or money, but they can limit the time and the place and the manner of this speech. So this can be to make sure that sidewalks remain free for pedestrian traffic. You can do it in this space for this amount of time, things like that. Those are acceptable. You can't just say you cannot engage in this type of speech because that would violate the first. The next thing to note here are gang activity and criminal laws responses to gang behavior. So attempts to regulate gang behavior involve making it a crime to participate, having harsher punishments for crimes committed by those in a gang, making it a crime to encourage a minor to participate, using RICO way back from a couple chapters ago, chapter 8, as a consequence, banning them from certain public places. But not all criminal laws have been effective at reducing this. For instance, Chicago tried to make it a crime for criminal street gang members to loiter with one another in any public place. The problem was, what does someone who's in a gang look like? And the statute was so broad that it could apply to any two people who are hanging out on the street for an extended period of time. It was written that broadly. So we saw the Supreme Court strike that law down. And in the intervening time, we have seen states and local governments turn to civil law responses for gang activity, primarily getting court injunctions, which can eliminate a public nuisance under the civil law. And there's a different standard, a lighter standard that lets cities get these injunctions in place more effectively, and they have broad authority to respond to specific needs of the community. For instance, if there's a specific park that is frequently being used after dark, an injunction can be asked to prevent no one from using that park, or no one under a certain age from using the park after dark. There's also civil gang injunctions, which are non-criminal lawsuits brought by cities to seek a restraining order to bar gang members from participating in gang activities. And again, this has also been effective. Some sociologists have surveyed these. They found positive short-term effects, but there haven't been any long-term effects from using these. But I think even in a community that experiences this, a positive short-term effect is a helpful impact. It's been slightly more effective than some of the criminal law remedies like loitering or things that are just harder to pinpoint exactly what you're trying to stop. And then we are going to jump forward to the next crime we're covering, because we're not covering every part of this chapter. We are jumping forward to the crime of prostitution. Prostitution is a crime that requires at least two people. The prostitute provides the service, the client who can provide the service, sometimes a pimp. I think this should who uses the service. I think that was a mistake there. So prostitution has evolved a decent amount. We still see kind of harsh treatment for women. Some states only punished, there's 3 types of statutes. Some states only punish the prostitute but not the John. Some states punish both but punish the prostitute more severely. Other states punish both equally. We have seen some shift here, and we have seen people we have seen a shift towards equal enforcement and statutes requiring the punishment of both parties who participate in this transaction. It's important to note that prostitution is still a regular occurrence. There were over 35,000 prostitution arrests in 2013. So this is still something that's going on. We have seen some. I think I have a slide on this too. some of the reasons we still see some distinctions are that we often only arrest the prostitute. We try and catch the person who's profiteering, why don't we try and focus more on catching the person who's pimping, which is also challenging sometimes. Again, we see by far more women are arrested. So some ways to kind of have a less double standard is that judges can prosecute both or none. We also have seen local governments where this criminal conduct occurs more frequently, changing their strategies. They are often we have seen them start to work. If you engage in prostitution in a car as a John, you can lose your car; it'll be forfeited. They started revoking the driver's licenses, particularly of repeat persons, as well as engaging in publishing of names in various media. For instance, somewhere in California had a billboard that announced, "Attention, Johns, we take pictures," and they actually would print those pictures in the local newspaper. So this is a unique area of law that has changed a lot. So I'd really like you to know that there is a double standard and what that means, i.e. that more women are charged versus men. Some of the remedies, those are the types of things I would like you to look at. I also think you really need to know the definitions of loitering, panhandling, and vagrancy, the restrictions on panhandling, and disorderly conduct. But that is it for this chapter. I will see you for chapter 13.